Thanks for joining us this week on the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. I'm Julie.
And I'm Thomas, and we're currently in a series called 15 Lessons After 15 Years of Marriage. We're all the way up to lesson 6, and this one is titled, It's Our Money, So Act Like It.
Yeah, so I think when you get married, or we even know some couples who have two different approaches to their finances. Either they combined their income and it's, our money, what's yours is mine, right away. Maybe they combine it the day they get married or right after they get back from the honeymoon. Or there's other couples out there who have it completely split, probably right down the middle with bills and, his money and her money. And that's probably what seems fair to them. And I really think that if people are splitting their money, it's because they couldn't agree on some financial issues and they just thought that's what would be easier for them.
Right.
Or maybe they didn't even, have time to talk about it. They got back from the honeymoon and got busy and years went by and they just didn't mean to. Maybe they just honestly never sat down to talk about it and combine their finances and how they were going to do that.
Right. And, we even talked in a recent episode, prioritizing your spouse, about how leading up to the wedding, when you're just engaged, you get so focused in on planning the wedding and making those decisions that all of the real life stuff is kind of on the back burner. And this is probably one of those topics that people forget to talk about leading up to the actual wedding. And then when they get back, they're like, oh, real life hit. We're moved into the same house now. We have to kind of figure all this out on the fly.
Yeah. So we're going to be discussing on this episode both sides and kind of the effects that each of them have. And so the first thing we're going to say is, if for the couple that has their money split, maybe when the bills have been covered, then each spouse can spend what they have left, if they see that as fit. And I would say it sounds like a reasonable plan, but honestly, the process there would then build resentment over time, because I can think of, with Thomas and I finances, just even purchases, whether they're big or small, you start judging the person on like the individual purchases that they made, and resentment, can creep into the marriage. It also divides spending power, which eliminates much of the financial value of marriage, of combining those finances to divide their spending power. You wouldn't be able to then plan for those long-term goals that you would have together, such as, buying a house or planning for retirement and things like that. And then lastly, I think it can also lead to something that would just ultimately ruin the relationship is financial infidelity, where one spouse can start hiding money from the other. Intentionally would be financial infidelity, or maybe sometimes unintentionally. But if you have your finances separate and you're not sure what that spouse is doing, then that's just you're completely opening the door for a lack of trust.
Sure. There. And, that financial infidelity can really show itself from a standpoint of how much each spouse makes in their income. If one spouse makes more than the other and then gets a raise and doesn't tell the other spouse that they got a raise, and it's just like, oh, I got some extra money, I can do some stuff now, and I don't have to worry about adding more of that to our savings because it's my money. And so it can really just get you in a pickle going that route.
I think that's hiding in that scenario. You got a raise, that's you could hide it from your spouse, which creates the lack of, or the trust issues. Or if you did share it, then I think it goes back to the first one of resentment.
Right.
You could resent them and never be good enough if you're the one not bringing home an equal or greater amount, because you're keeping score in that scenario of his and her money.
Right. Absolutely. And, fun fact surrounding this and why things like this are such a problem. Did you know that credit card companies know with 98% accuracy 2 years before you're going to get divorced?
Wow. That's kind of scary.
Right? Yeah.
Like creepy.
So I mean, now this stat isn't specifically related to having finances in a marriage split. It's just kind of talking about spending patterns. But how much easier is that going to be to predict in marriages that have separate bank accounts, or so not necessarily separate bank accounts, because that's a whole different logistical thing, but marriages that have split finances. If you are running split finances, it is easier to hide things. It's easier to get that credit card just in your name and start those spending purchases when you're not happy or the resentment has set in and things are starting to happen. And that makes it even easier for credit card companies to know that information just based off of your spending patterns. So don't become one of those statistics. That's a big problem. And then, just from a logistical perspective, where do you draw the line with that kind of stuff?
If it's his and her?
If it's split finances, his and hers, where do you draw the line? Because let's talk about it from this simple example first. How big is the fight when someone eats your Doritos in the pantry? Like, you bought those with your money. How big does the fight turn into? Over something so stupid.
That's like a
right?
roommate fight.
Exactly.
I bought that milk.
Keeping your money separate really is just going to kind of turn it that way and make little things magnify. What about if, you got a flat tire? If we had our money separate and you got a flat tire on your car, then you didn't have enough money to fix it because you're in between paydays, whatever. So then I loan you the money. Well, that's a whole different dynamic, because what happens if you don't pay it back to me by our agreed date? That's weird. What happens, if you don't pay it back, period? Then at what point do I go from being a supportive spouse and lending you the money to becoming a debt collector of my spouse trying to get my money back? It's just a weird dynamic. And look at that from the other side, from the one who received the loan, the borrower, the loan. I'm using air quotes here. The borrower side of you. Proverbs 22:7 says, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." Now, even if you're not a Christian, Proverbs is like the book of wisdom in the Bible. It's just full of wisdom, and that's, not even a Christian-y verse, right, so to speak. That's just a straight up truth.
Talking about money.
If you've ever had a credit card that's late and you start getting those phone calls, you feel like a slave to the credit card company. And so go back to the spouse perspective. I let you loan you some money for that flat tire so you can get your tire fixed. You don't pay it back right away, and then now what happens? I become a debt collector, and then I start, holding that against you. Like, we go out to dinner. Well, maybe I shouldn't pay for your Chipotle tonight because you still owe me money for the tire, and I'll just start taking it out of your dinner fees or whatever. Like, it just really, things are going to get super petty and kind of ridiculous. And the dynamic of the borrower slave to the lender is really going to show apparent in a scenario like that. So yeah, just really be wary of that.
Well, I think also with bill splitting, when you split it all down the middle, because I'm just trying to picture different scenarios and things that we've heard of. Maybe they're not like, oh, his paycheck and her paycheck and her bills and his bills. Maybe they just split it right down the middle. So it is one big pot, but half and half kind of a thing. But that doesn't even communicate how financial burdens will be handled. If your partner who's financially supporting, more or less, what if one
or
spouse,
even half, right? Or even
right,
if it's split right down the middle, even half.
Like, so what if, not to have too many what if scenarios, but just stuff that you should be talking about before marriage, or if you're already down the road in this, then it's not too late to stop and have these conversations.
Never too
now, late. And play that what if game. So what if one spouse loses a job? What if I decide to cut back on hours or take a pay cut because I want to do a new career? I mean, if you listen to previous episodes, that's our story. We both kind of gone in and out of, just different passions and had to shoulder different financial responsibilities. What if one leaves the workforce entirely to raise children, or wants to go back to school, or has to care for a parent? That's maybe unexpected. The list could go on, but the point is really what we've seen is marriages who don't combine their income, they're actually more likely to end in divorce because it's just an easier out.
Right.
I'm not tied to you. I'm not as committed to this if I can take my paycheck, my bank account, my bills, my belongings, and walk out of this relationship. And so that's why we titled it's our money, so act like it.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and take a look at the other side of this scenario, which is going to be combining your finances. So we're talking about no more splitting it down the middle. You just combine everything. And it goes from a me or his and hers mentality to a we mentality. We have an income, and that hits on a few levels: spiritually, morally, and even legally. Everything is combined.
Right.
And, to touch on a point that you were talking about in the last section, when you were talking about if a spouse had to leave the workforce to raise children, regardless of income, each person is going to bring value to the financial side of the relationship. Whether you're the breadwinner or the caretaker, you're going to bring value. And value is that kind of intangible thing, but that's even more of a reason to be on the same team. If you're the breadwinner, you have to see the value that your spouse, the caretaker, is bringing to the relationship, and you have to start acting like the we scenario, that this is our money scenario. Even if you're the one bringing it all home, you wouldn't be able to do that without them staying home and taking care of the kids.
That's good.
And so, that's just how it goes. Or they go to work, you pay for daycare, or, whatever the scenario is, and you're both bringing home money. Those are your two options. And so.
But what you're saying is they're both examples bring value no matter if there's a dollar sign next to the person. Exactly.
So if one person is bringing in $0 per year, they're bringing in a ton of value that, I mean, think of it this way: from a life insurance perspective, if you were the breadwinner, you would want to make sure that you have life insurance on your spouse who's the caretaker, because there is going to be a financial impact if the worst happened to your spouse. You're then going to have to pay someone to take care of your kids. So in that regard, there's the value that they bring. It's just doesn't show on a W-2.
No, that's a great example. I don't think a lot of people think about that, or the person staying home may not feel that they have that they're contributing enough. So when you look at value and you take money out of it, and it's all combined, it just really, I think, can bring you together as a partnership in that relationship in your marriage.
Yeah, exactly. Additionally, putting all of your money together is going to force communication, and it's going to force accountability, eliminating more of the possibility of financial infidelity that we were talking about earlier in the episode. Of course, unfortunately, there's still always a chance that something like that could happen. But by sitting down and doing the budget together, by everyone looking over the bank statements together, you're going to really eliminate a lot of opportunity for that to happen, which is going to build trust, especially if both spouses are open to doing that. And then lastly, it's going to force you to set goals together. Since we have an income now, we can set goals. Like we want to go on a vacation and do blank. Or we want to buy a house, so we need to save up this much. Maybe, you didn't buy a house right when you got married and you moved into an apartment, or, were renting somewhere. And so you started saving up to buy a house. That's going to be a lot harder to do with finances separated. Once you combine them, you can make that a shared goal. And when we're sharing our goals, we're sharing our lives. We're combining our lives together to move one family unit forward down the road to accomplish those goals. So we always want to try and leave you guys with some takeaways as we near the end of an episode. And so we're at that point here. And the one takeaway that we want to provide is money is really one of the most intimate areas of anybody's life, whether you're married or not. I mean, think about it from this perspective. How often do you talk about money with anybody around you outside of your spouse, because we're obviously advocating for that, but with anyone around you? What would you say?
No, I think it's a very, very private thing. You don't talk about how much you make or how much you spend or anything.
Right. So it's vital that since this is one of the most intimate areas of anyone's life in general, that if this is a hidden area from your spouse, it's going to cause that distrust. It's going to cause things to start crumbling. And so you have to make sure that you're opening up and talking about that to your spouse. I mean, we just did an episode recently called Intimacy is More Than Just Sex. And I would say that talking about money and being on the same page with money provides so much security for both spouses that there's no other thing to call it but intimate.
Absolutely.
So, but you could be sitting there and saying, yeah, but this is how my background was with my money. You don't know my background. You don't know how I was raised or what I learned or what I didn't learn and why I'm scared. And well, yeah, you're right. I don't. Your spouse probably doesn't if you're saying that. So you need to share your money story with your spouse. Share what you've been through. Whether you're combining your money already or whether you're on the side that has your money split, you may have some history with money that you still need to get to the forefront with your spouse. And that might give them the insight of, oh, that's why you spend the way you spend, or that's why you like saving so much money. And you have to share your story. You have to share your fears, your dreams, and your attitude about giving money away. Giving, just, sidebar here, giving should be one of the top things in your budget. If not the top thing in your budget. Giving changes your heart towards money. And so if you give some money away to someone less fortunate than you, that's going to always make you feel like no matter what scenario you're in, you were able to help somebody else. You can be sitting in $200,000 worth of debt and you buy someone's lunch, you are going to feel so much different that day. So little soapbox there about giving, but make sure it's at the top of your budget.
Yeah, it makes you grateful for what you have.
Absolutely.
And what you're able to give. And I think just like that, the first takeaway is to talk to your spouse about money. Be open, be intimate, because no matter what scenario you're in, it's never too late to change your relationship with money, which will change your relationship with your spouse, and then your future generations. And so then the next and last takeaway is don't just talk about it. So even if you do combine your finances and you're like, yep, I do that. Great. It says it's our money, so act like it. Well, the act like it part is not enough. Here's the fine print of this episode. It's not enough to just combine your money and then never talk about it again and never be actively involved with it together. So the last takeaway is to do a budget together. And then have a regular, we recommend monthly budget meeting together. Because another, people say, yep, we combine them, check that box. Yep, we do a budget, check that box. But do you look at that budget every month to see, did you hit that budget? Did you go over that budget? What does that look like?
Well, and talk about the perspective of the I call it an older model of doing finances where one spouse, yes, maybe all the money's combined, but one spouse does the finances and tells the other spouse, how to, spend and, what the budget is, but the second spouse doesn't really get involved. That can also be a recipe for disaster. So that's where the act like it part comes in, is doing that budget together. Even if you're not the money-oriented one or the one who naturally gravitates towards that, that's okay. You still have to have your nose in it a little bit and make sure that you understand what's going on.
I mean, absolutely. That's why it's a lesson after 15 years of marriage that we've learned. Because if you haven't, if we haven't played our cards, for you to see so easily early on in this episode, we do have our money combined. We did that from the start, but we did not always do this last takeaway of doing a budget together. And learning to do that over time has built the trust. It's created ownership together of our finances, but
of successes and failures.
It was like a partnership,
right?
In a covenant relationship. Mm-hmm. It's taken out, going back to trust. It's taken away the insecurities and the wonder of where not just what are you doing with the money, but where's the money going to? Mm-hmm. Are we safe and secure, or are we, struggling? And it, took out resentment on those purchases. And there's so much more I can get into details. And I'm not the financial person in the family, but just from doing it together. So practically speaking, what that looks like is, we have the budget, the monthly income, and the monthly income and expenses. Those are the right financial words. I told you I'm not a financial person. The plus and the minuses. But then we have a monthly budget meeting. Yeah. And this isn't just a meeting that we do on date night or, when we're talking about the schedule or the calendar and like all these other things. Like, it is only a budget meeting. So there is a defined time, a day and time, a start time and an end time. Because if you're new to this, you could spend hours talking, maybe even starting to fight about money. And that's not the point here. You actually need to limit it to shorter amounts, just, little bite-sized pieces. And it might be a long journey, but it's something that we've personally walked through, right, that then now I can, testify that we are on the same page. But we did have to set those boundaries on parameters of time limits. So, I could only handle so much talk about these numbers before I got frustrated. But also now I can get excited to show up for that monthly meeting and go, cool, where are we at? How'd we do? What do we need to talk and plan about? And so talk about money, combine your money, and then do a budget together.
Yeah. Totally. And, if you need help in this area of combining your money or getting your budget set up, creating that plan, I am a financial coach. I do this for a living. So this is an area that I really hone in on. It's one of my favorite areas to work with. So if that's an area that you're struggling with, reach out to me. We're going to have the information where you can reach me at TMH Financial Coaching in our show notes. You can also find me on social and check everything out there. But reach out to me. I'd love to find a way to help you out. This is a really practical way that I can provide some one-on-one help for you guys. So make sure you reach out, and I'd be happy to work with you. And then lastly, we're coming up to the end here. Thanks so much for staying for another episode of the Marriage Puzzle Podcast. As always, make sure you tune in weekly on Mondays as new episodes are getting released. Go and follow us. If this is your first time hearing about us, go and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Marriage Puzzle. You can go check out our website, marriagepuzzle.com, where you'll find blog posts that release on the 1st and 15th of every month. And again, if this is your first time listening to us, leave us a rating. We would really appreciate that. That really helps us to spread the word about our podcast. But we also encourage you to go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2 of the podcast. That will give you a little bit more information about us, who we are, our story, why we named the podcast Marriage Puzzle, and things like that. And go ahead and subscribe while you're at it. So thanks so much for tuning in to another episode, and we look forward to you joining us next week, where together we'll work on marriage one puzzle piece at a time. See you later.
Bye.